BBC Television's season on dealing with drugs continues now as Public Eye investigates.
Illegal drugs boom industry of the 90s.
Millions of people take ecstasy every week.
Drugs crime everywhere. Do we get tough or do we get tender?
That is exactly the tightrope, if you like, that is being tread.
Tonight on Public Eye, will the government's new master plan work? Welcome to the Midnight Express, a coach trip from Manchester to Holland aimed at people who want to smoke cannabis without fear of punishment. In Britain, these people would be criminals, liable to fines increased fivefold only last year.
I've never been to Amsterdam and I've heard such a lot about it. Crazy weekend syndrome.
A few of us are going to go over to Amsterdam, sit in a few cafes, have a joint, have a beer and just sort of chill out.
I've never actually smoked cannabis before, so it's something new to me. I wouldn't be averse to having it.
Like those who ran for the border during America's battle against booze in the 20s, they're dodging the prohibition. No one knows how many British people use cannabis. A conservative estimate is 1 million.
Just a few minutes, we'll be pulling up outside the Bulldog Palace, where they open up especially in the morning for us.
There are dozens of cafes like this in Amsterdam where you can freely buy and smoke small quantities of cannabis, even if you are a little out of practice.
What's happening? No.
To those who use it, cannabis is a mild intoxicant, less harmful than tobacco or alcohol. But back home, smokers know there's no political sympathy. They're seen as part of an indivisible drug problem.
In an age when our children are more likely to be killed by a drug dealer than by an enemy missile, it is time to let the security service themselves into the battle for the public and against organised crime.
The dealers in hard drugs who prey on the young, the lonely and the vulnerable. They deserve long stretches in prison.
I'm heading for Bradford. Armed with a copy of the government's new drugs policy, Tackling Drugs Together, I want to see how it looks on the ground. The 3-year plan calls for a coordinated push across the whole country, from doctors, police, probation officers, teachers, community workers and prisons. It's a double whammy of tough law and beefed up prevention. Bradford is an ordinary mid-sized English city. It's had its share of unemployment and industrial blight, but it's no worse than most. The drug scene too is average, that's to say, booming. Smile, a Bradford dance club. For these young people, ecstasy is routine as lager, but ecstasy ranks with heroin as a Class A drug. Pass some to your friends and you could be jailed for years. For over 500,000 young people every weekend, a good night out means breaking the law.
If you have a look in here tonight, I'm sure there's probably a lot of people taking drugs. But then again, you have a look, you will not see one violent word said tonight.
The reality of today's youth culture is that a lot of people take drugs. Millions of people take ecstasy every week.
I think all drugs should be made legal. All chemical ways of altering your body or mind or whatever you want to do with it should be legal.
They're caught up unnecessarily in a criminal justice system for what is really minor offences, really. They're caught up in a very costly criminal justice process that doesn't really help tackle some of the underlying issues that face their lives. And that seems to me, again, a waste of public money.
20 years ago, I worked for Bradford's evening paper and wrote about the city's drug scene. There was a new drugs clinic, but heroin was almost unknown. There was concern about abuse of prescription drugs like tranquilizers, and drugs like LSD could be found, but only if you looked hard for them.
In those days, we would prosecute any find we had, even if it was just dust in the bottom of somebody's handbag. Now we have wholesale misuse, abuse of drugs, not only amongst particular factions of society, but right across society. We have the 60s hippies that are still at it with cannabis. We have the 90s phenomenon of rave drugs and young people believing that this is very high on their recreational list. We have a growing number of people who are touched immeasurably by drugs through crime.
Sierra Hotel to Sierra. I've got 2 females in my store. They're acting very suspiciously. Is there anyone to assist, over?
Yeah, you see, we're going to come across and have a look. How many is there? Is it 2 females?
PC Lou Mackenzie runs Bradford's shoplifting squad. He's riding the second crime wave that comes with drugs.
Keep talking to us, Judith, we'll sort it out.
Narcotics addicts who steal to fund their habits.
I only got paid because you don't keep the streets.
For the police, it's like fishing in a trout farm.
Can we split them up here? They're discussing.
Get this on video. Get off my court now. Don't be caught now. You're getting done for assault. You're getting done for assault.
We're walking down. For assault in a minute. Do you understand that? Do you understand that?
These women are known to the police as serious drug abusers. They're also familiar in Bradford's red light district, and they know the way to the cells. Here's one Lou Mackenzie picked up 2 hours ago. Malcolm is another addict, another thief. He too knows the routine.
Okay. Lovely.
I'd wake up in the morning, obviously I'd be withdrawing. I'd go into town, maybe steal some items from shops, sell them, then buy some drugs with the money that I'd got from that.
Did you get caught?
I've been caught loads of times.
How many times would you say?
I've lost count. I'd say I can remember once I was in court and they quoted me being caught shoplifting 70 odd times.
Right. And have you been in prison?
Yeah, I have, yeah.
The store detectives are linked directly to the police station. So it's not too surprising you get caught when you're as blatant as this. Watch out, the manager's about, and when you run, it's not Jeremy Beadle round the corner, it's the cops.
The research that we've done would say it would be between 50 and 55% of shoplifting in Bradford is committed by people to fund the drugs habits.
Today, Malcolm is bailed. Prison is probably the next stop. There, drugs are widely available and many inmates will have a history of drug abuse.
Right, and just sign that for a copy of your charge. And we'll give you a copy in a minute. Just sign there.
The criminal justice system is choking on drugs. Some think the crime caused by drugs is worse than the damage done by the drugs themselves.
Our current drug policy is creating gangsters. So it's creating big crime and it's creating petty crime to fuel the habit. It's a ridiculous shoot-in-the-foot policy.
The rogues gallery on PC Mackenzie's wall shows a notorious heroin user, Dave Phillips. He's also been a dealer, part of the ever-expanding underworld which stimulates ever-growing demand even among children.
I talk to kids now and they haven't even tried cannabis. They've gone straight on to smack, you know, heroin. And you've never seen really young, you know, 13, 14, 15-year-olds using it when I first started using 10 years ago. You know, it was older end than that. But now it's just everybody, even housewives. I know housewives sort of have said, if you can't beat them, join them.
That's how you smoke heroin, on tin foil, make a tube out of it.
Dave took me to Ollerton where he grew up. 20 years ago it was popular. Today, when a home falls vacant, kids rip out copper pipes to raise cash for drugs. Drugs are cheap and getting cheaper in spite of record seizures Heroin sells in kid-sized packages.
10 years ago, lowest you could buy really were a £20 wrap, quarter gram. Now you can buy a fiver's worth, a £5 wrap. And they have that thing, buy 3, get 1 free.
Those who can get out do. Private houses are up for sale, leaving behind the dealers who are also the drug users in a dead-end street co-op. The government has just said that it wants local authorities to turn out drug dealers from council estates.
If they did this on this estate, you might be turning out 700 people.
The police know they can't beat this drug crime explosion with old methods. Increasingly, they talk the language of prevention and cooperation with other agencies.
A conservative estimate is that 50% of all property crime and car crime is directly associated with drugs in one form or another. The growing amount of violence there is exerted by people on innocent people to actually gain money to support their drug habits. As that problem grows, then the police service resources are directed more and more in one form or another to that problem. Drugs are a huge issue, but they're not just an issue for the police service, they're an issue for everyone.
Dave visits his doctor. Since his last arrest, he's been on methadone, a heroin substitute without the buzz. He gets it even when he's broken the rules and topped up with street drugs.
So how are you getting on?
I've used once this week.
Once?
Yeah.
When was that?
On Wednesday.
This is harm minimisation. The idea is to ease Dave's cravings so he won't steal. He might stabilise. 3/4 of addicts do, eventually. These programmes are controversial.
Okay.
But an official review due soon backs them. Research suggests for every £1 spent, taxpayers save 7.
Yes, please, make the point. Yes. Fine.
Is the balance between law and order measures and treatment harm minimisation measures in tackling drugs together right?
No, I don't think it is. 2/3 of the expenditure that government has in supporting tackling drugs together, specialist drug programmes, goes on law enforcement, international controls, those sorts of things, and only 1/3 of the £520-odd million is spent on prevention, education, treatment and care. Now that seems to me a skewed priority.
It's possible to argue endlessly, of course, about what is the appropriate balance, but law enforcement is inherently an expensive business. I think that the effectiveness of the work to keep the stuff out is indeed very good. It's not perfect, but then of course law enforcement really is.
If it's very good, why has the price of the most dangerous drugs on the streets been going down rather than up?
Well, as I say, there is here, as in the use of drugs themselves, a problem that needs to be tackled. No one is attempting to suggest that there isn't a problem or that we have yet solved it.
The third leg of the new anti-drugs plan, E for education.
Gives with E. Ecstasy, yeah. So that's good again.
The focus is on primary schools, the idea to catch them early, since we know that 1 in 7 14 to 15-year-olds is already a user of illegal drugs. The aim is to teach them how to say no. These 10 and 11-year-olds already know a lot. How do they take it from like heroin?
The melt it on tin foil and use a straw.
And what about ganja or draw? What do people do with that?
Draw, they put in cigs, and it's like this green paper thing, and they put it in cigs and then smoke it.
They melt it.
And then they smoke it.
Rock, strongest drug you can get. Once you've took that, you need more, and you'll do anything to get it.
Rugby is the reward, but can schools deter young people from drugs? No, says the woman who once ran the health department drugs desk.
The international researched experience is that there is really very little evidence indeed that drug education, irrespective of the approach used, does anything but increase knowledge about drugs. Now that in itself is not a bad thing, but you may be very knowledgeable about something, but it may not necessarily affect your behaviour.
If you're asking me whether I can point to a specific educational effect of work that's already been done, then no. But what I would resist is the suggestion that by improving the way in which messages are put across in schools, by making greater use of peer education, for example, and sometimes role models as well, two other things that are being looked at as part of the programs at the moment, I do believe that you can have an effect in raising awareness and changing behaviour.
Dear Mr. and Mrs. Betts, forgive me for writing at such a time, and especially as I am a virtual...
Parents of older teenagers know only too well how hard it is to make any anti-drugs message stick.
Last night I managed to talk to them more frankly than ever before.
You have experienced every parent's worst nightmare and found the courage to try and...
Paul and Janet Betts, propelled by grief at the death of their daughter Leah from a single tablet of ecstasy, are in the campaigning front line. They warn against scare tactics.
Experimenting with drugs.
Once again, I offer you my deepest condolences. I don't think we were the only parents in the land that never realised just what a youth culture this is.
Yeah.
Had we known that, we could have said to Leah, look, you know, we know this is part of your way of enjoying yourself, the same as we used to go out and have half a lager. But can we talk about this? You explain to us, you tell us what it's all about.
Don't be ashamed if your kids have used it or are using it. They live in a slightly different, as Jan said, a different culture to the way I was brought up and the way Jan was brought up. And you've got to start expecting something like this will happen.
When friends told Kate smoking heroin would make her feel good, they forgot to tell her something else. How bad it would also make her feel.
The government is listening. This was the approach in a famous 80s campaign against drugs. Kids mocked it.
Yeah, I'm still alive, I suppose.
Don't be a dummy. Heroin really does screw you up.
So what sort of music is this? Is this jungle or house or what is it?
This is just a basic rave dance.
This is a rave dance. Okay.
This is the message mid-90s style, designed by the government's Health Education Authority. It stresses health risk, but is factual, not emotional. No more scare tactics. It's harm minimisation in action, no assumption that appeals for abstinence will work.
The only truly safe option is not to take ecstasy at all.
One message is aimed at ecstasy users. It tells them how much water they should drink when they're using the drug. Bradford's ravers are the first to receive the new advice. The message delivered straight to potential users.
I think there should be more stuff like this just to warn people of the dangers, because people won't stop using it. So I think things like this are a good idea.
I think this is a step in the direction to like tell people what they should be doing, but on the other hand, this is stuff that people know anyway, really.
Whatever they do, people are still going to take these drugs, ecstasy, speed, acid.
For ministers, it's a high-wire act. They want abstinence, but they also want safer drug taking. It's so sensitive, the ecstasy campaign was sanctioned personally by the Prime Minister.
Aren't you in effect condoning the use of drugs?
Well, that is exactly the tightrope, if you like, that is being tread. That is why that part of the white paper was very carefully drafted. We do not wish to be seen. We do not condone the use of drugs or the staging of events at which it is intended that drugs should be available. But just like in enforcing other bits of the law, you're not always going to achieve that perfectly, and it doesn't stop you wanting to take steps to deal with the harm that arises if the law is broken.
In Bradford, these are the people Tony Newton expects to walk the tightrope with him.
Anybody got any questions about the establishment of the drug reference group?
The Drug Action Team brings together all the city's agencies. It's a talking shop with enough new money only to run its meetings. Practical initiatives come from existing budgets. But all political leaders back the approach. Coordination is the heart of the new plan.
we think that these programs should be given a chance to work. We're not saying they're the perfect answer, but they appear to be the best answer available at the moment.
We need to educate our young people about the dangers of drugs and develop their skills to resist.
So the politicians are at one. Are they then confident the plan will deliver and stop the spread of drugs and crime?
People who do misuse drugs.
I would judge it, I think I would say, by seeking to measure the greater awareness of the problem and the greater involvement, for example, of parents and teachers with seeking to make sure that the problem is addressed in schools, which is one of the things we're seeking to promote. And of course, if you like, the bottom line, I would like to see evidence, though I doubt this would come very quickly because it's not that kind of problem, that the attraction of drugs, the prevalence of drugs, the numbers of young people feeling that it's smart to take drugs is falling.
Do you think that there is any realistic chance at the end of 3 years that we will see any evidence of that?
I hope so, but you'd probably think me rather foolish if I made some bold prediction of that kind, because it is not the kind of problem that can be tackled on the very short timescale.
This is the home of Chris Davis MP, who thinks he has a longer-range vision.
Hi. Hello, Ian. Hi, good to see you. Come in.
Convinced we're losing the war against drugs, he called for a royal commission to examine the problem. This daredevil breach of the political consensus almost cost him a by-election. It was rough stuff. Davies' own campaign manager said better take Labour's punches in silence than fight on such a treacherous issue.
Which suggested that I'd actually been dropped because of the stand I take on this issue.
Why do you think politicians find it so hard to talk about this subject in a way that you would find convincing?
That's a very difficult question. I honestly think the main reason is that they haven't thought about it properly. They certainly haven't talked to some of the senior police officers and customs and excise officials who are making clear that they believe that the existing drug strategy is going nowhere, that it's not curbing the problem of drug abuse, and it's certainly not doing anything to tackle the problem of growing criminality in this country. But I think also that politicians are fearful of voters' reaction and of being attacked by other politicians.
I thought what we said about Chris Davis in Littleborough and Saddleworth was entirely legitimate. And let me say, if the reverse situation had been the case, where our candidate had been calling for a Royal Commission on drugs and the Liberal Democrats had thought they could make something of it, they would have done so.
I personally think that the way we're handling the drug problem is a tragedy.
Labour even pounces on shadow cabinet members if they whisper dissent on drugs. Claire Short had to apologise when she spoke out.
I think we shouldn't be cowards, and we should get some archbishops and former chief constables and see if we can't organise the whole thing better.
We think it would be wrong to decriminalise drugs or to legalise their use, and therefore we see no purpose whatever in establishing a Royal Commission, which implies that we have an open mind on a matter where we've come to a settled conclusion already.
So this is the political bottom line. The new policy may well not work, but we won't entertain alternatives. It's true there are no panaceas, but there are alternatives. For addictive drugs, treatment services are a good investment. They cut crime and improve addicts' lives. Shouldn't we therefore create more, if necessary with cash from the police budget? Recreational drugs are a bigger problem. They involve millions of people, not thousands, and account for most direct drug crime. If we can't persuade people to stop using them, experienced voices call for radical options.
I think the other aspect, which perhaps would be valuable to look at the moment, is the actual categorization of drugs within the Misuse of Drugs Act, because I think perhaps some are now inappropriately classified. For example, ecstasy with heroin and heroin substances, where their relative harm is nowhere comparable.
I personally, having looked at this for many years, would be for a policy that decriminalised recreational drugs, in which I include cannabis and the dance drugs, and proceeded by maintenance and support of users of drugs such as opiates, of heroin and so on, to try and get them through until they were ready to come off it, which they do.
Thank you. Congratulations. Thank you. Congratulations. Thank you. Thanks, Margaret.
For Keith Hellawell, it's promotions day in Wakefield. The police too want jaw rather than war. Hellawell backs the Royal Commission Claire Short and Chris Davis advocate.
I think a Royal Commission would be most appropriate. I'm not just sure of the timing. I think we need the current strategy of tackling drugs together to settle down. But I think once it does settle down, once we recognise what's coming out of that, the movement that we're making, then to re-examine that, to examine what is happening elsewhere in the world, to examine pragmatically, to examine dispassionately, to examine objectively what is happening, what is about, what the effects are, and what the effects have been of our strategy, what the effects have been of different countries' strategy will be extremely useful.
I think it will also begin to challenge some of our thinking about what works in terms of law enforcement. Does it prevent, does it deter, does it punish people to not go on and do it again? And I think that's what a Royal Commission, for me, would begin to ask.
Mary Tuck has watched politicians box themselves in. At every stage they've hoped the surge in drug use is a whim. In reality, each wave built on the previous one.
Politicians, what they're for in a way is interpreting the feelings of ordinary people and playing them back again. But when they're cowards, which I think they have been on this issue, they play a rather cheap rhetoric of people who don't understand it. So they've fed an absolute panic, fear of drugs, and they've played along with that and used it. And they use it. They can't actually stop drugs use, but they keep playing that more panic fear. So it makes the whole problem grow and grow, and makes them unable to use information about what it's really like out there.
Drugs are a huge concern. They are, in my mind, at the heart of the politics of this country. And I think drugs are now on the agenda. People are talking about them. There is a wave of concern in the hearts and minds of every citizen of this land. And therefore I think politicians ignore that at their own peril. I mean, it must be on their agenda. It is on their agenda. And I would personally have thought that the level of debate should be more rather than less. But that is a matter for politicians, not for police officers.
Dave picks up his injectable methadone prescription every day. He's better off than many addicts. At least he's on a treatment program. In many parts of the country, they don't exist. Dave is also a statistic. He's part of a threefold rise in registered heroin addicts within the last decade. Unless the current plan is more successful than predicted, there'll be no let-up in this trend. More drugs, more crime, more futures lost. In 3 years, drugs policy will be reviewed. Perhaps then we'll really have a vision beyond the drugs war. Dave too has his hopes.
34 and time's running out. You know, by the time I get myself sorted out physically and mentally, I'm going to be 40 and I'm going to be hard to employ then. So I have to start looking at future. I don't want to die a lonely old man in a bedsit somewhere.
If you would like